Okay, one of the other things that you're going to be asked to draw occasionally is going to be water. So I've drawn a very simple little pond with a few rocks. We're going to try to learn how to make that just a tad more realistic. We don't necessarily want to spend forever and ever and ever doing these sorts of things. So with our rocks, what I try to do is kind of find a top of the rock and then add maybe a little bit of detail to the top of the rock, because they have kind of like the light shining on them, or that kind of gives you some sort of roundness or odd shape. And then you can kind of just go around like that. You can even add a little bit of shading at the bottom of the rock. Just add a little bit of that detail. Makes it look just a little bit more realistic. Yeah, they still look like almost like scribbles, but they look a tad more like rocks than the strange little things that I had on there. With water, you want to try to make it look one of two ways. Either like you've thrown a pebble into it, so you can start with, this is where you throw your pebble, and then you're going to kind of move around outside that. You might have another partial one out here, sort of like that. Right, and I might prefer that maybe a bit more round. I'd probably go back and erase that, take some line weight off of that. But that's one way to do it. I'm going to do this other one in a harder a harder line so you can see it, so we don't have to take the time to draw a whole nother rock and pond. The other way you can do it, and I don't personally prefer this one, but it's entirely up to you, is to make it look more like waves. And that way you can do something along these lines. Some people prefer the waves. I personally prefer the pebbles, but that's entirely up to you. Both are fairly commonly utilized. So let me draw that. Some people don't like the time it takes to draw those extra lines in there. They're trying to get things a little too close for comfort, that sort of thing. So you can also draw them touching and not worry so much about where you would have the mortar. This is a little easier to draw, perhaps not as accurate because it doesn't account for things like your mortar, but it is a little bit easier to draw, and that's okay. And if you want to make it just a little bit fancier, again, you can add a couple of those action lines, and that helps. I personally, as you can see, am better at this one than I am at this one. You will find that you like a style better than another style, or you're better at reproducing a certain style. You might also be asked to do patio blocks, and again, you can, those are usually rectangles. You can almost freehand those. If you find that you're struggling, again, you can at least make some of the lines with a straight edge, particularly if you find yourself having gaps like that where you're struggling, or the boxes are suddenly starting to be different sizes. You could easily come along. If they're starting to be different sizes, you can easily come along and do even part of them with some straight edges. Just as you can see, just kind of eyeballing it here. And then kind of filling in the gaps. You might not like that. Maybe that doesn't look as good to you either. So it's just kind of up to you as to your individual style and your personal preference. This is, again, since these patio blocks are often made of concrete, you might just add a little tiny bit of your stippling there to give it a little bit of more realistic texture. Let's see, that's a little hard to see. There. It just gives it a bit more of a realistic texture.